In 1961, a coal miner named Earl Spradlin climbed out of the number 9 shaft in McDowell County, West Virginia, and felt the flat weight of a leather sap shift against his ribs as a stranger stepped out of the dark. He never started trouble, but a man who worked 1,000 feet underground learned to carry the means to end it. Most of what he kept in his pockets that night is now illegal in at least 30 states. Number 14 on this list was sold openly in the Sears Roebuck catalog for 55 cents, then quietly banned in most jurisdictions before 1950. And number 3 was so common in these coalfields that company stores stocked them next to the chewing tobacco. Before we count down, subscribe, because once you understand what a coal miner considered ordinary pocket gear, you will never look at a hardware store the same way again. Let us count them down. Number 25. Every coal miner who ever walked the dark road from the tipple to the bathhouse knew the value of a fist wrapped around a tight roll of pennies. 50 copper cents rolled tight in brown paper formed a solid cylinder, 2 inches long and dense in the palm, turning an open hand into a hammer that added mass to every knuckle without adding a single inch of reach. The coal companies paid in scrip, but every man kept real pennies for exactly this reason, and a 1959 mine safety bulletin from Welch noted the practice without ever calling it a weapon. The roll made a faint copper rattle when a man closed his grip, worn smooth on the edges from years of riding a pocket seam. Carrying one, said a man expected the walk home to be his own business. Your grandfather called it pocket change. The law eventually called it a concealed weapon. Number 24. Before mall stores sold decorative buckles as fashion, coal miners wore solid brass buckles that weighed half a pound and rode on a doubled leather strap. The buckle measured 3 inches across, cast thick, and the belt itself was harness leather 1/8 of an inch thick, swung in a loop so the brass arced through the air and landed flat against bone. Miners bought them at the company store for under $1, and a Logan County deputy testified in 1948 that more brawls in the camps ended with a belt than with a blade. The leather made a flat, dense crack against a man's shoulder, nothing like a strap and nothing like a stick. A miner who unbuckled slowly was making a promise everyone in the room understood. No law could outlaw a belt, and no man who wore one was ever truly unarmed. Number 23. This flat steel blade with a squared-off tip was designed for cutting through roof timbers and prying loose slate at the working face. The miner's pick and its cousin, the slate bar, ran 18 inches of forged steel, light enough to hang on a belt loop and balanced to swing one-handed in a 4-foot seam. Hardware suppliers in Bluefield sold them by the crate to the operators, who issued one to every man on the section, and a single bar cost the company around 90 cents in 1952. The steel rang a dull note when it tapped stone, cold to the grip even in August. A man who carried his bar topside after the shift was carrying a tool, and everyone agreed to see it that way. The bar was never banned because no court could call a miner's own equipment a weapon. Number 22. A flat piece of harness leather sewn around a strip of lead, small enough to vanish in a jacket pocket, heavy enough to drop a man with one swing. The classic blackjack ran 7 inches with a flexible spring shaft and a weighted head packed with shot or a poured lead slug, the whole thing wrapped in oiled leather and stitched tight at the seam. Mail-order houses sold them for under $2, and a 1955 Charleston police inventory listed dozens confiscated from miners and mill workers in a single year. It carried a dead, heavy silence in the hand, no rattle and no shine, just dense weight that said exactly what it was. A man who owned one rarely needed to use it twice. By the 1960s, blackjacks were banned outright across most of Appalachia, Police kept them, civilians lost them. Number 21. When nothing else was within reach, every boy raised in a coal camp knew that a cotton work sock filled with creek gravel became a weapon in about 10 seconds. The sock held a pound of rounded river stone, knotted off 6 inches above the load, so it swung like a flail and struck like a sap. And when the fight was over, a man simply emptied it and put it back on his foot. There was nothing to find and nothing to confiscate, which is why a 1953 Pike County magistrate complained in writing that he could not charge a thing he could not name. It made a low whoosh and a dull thud, the gravel grinding faintly when the sock was shaken. A man who improvised one was telling you he had run out of patience, not options. The law never found a way to outlaw a sock and a handful of rocks. Number 20. Smaller and more discreet than the blackjack. The palm sap was a flat oval leather pouch packed with lead shot that lay hidden inside a closed fist. It measured barely 4 inches, molded to the curve of the hand. The lead distributed across the striking face, so a single slap carried the force of a hammer with none of the bulk. Catalogues listed them as gentlemen's protectors for around $1.25, and a Harlan Company Guard's 1946 logbook recorded carrying one on every payday escort. The leather warmed to the hand and gave off a faint oiled smell, worn pale where the thumb rode. A man who kept one was a man who wanted a fight settled before anyone saw it begin. By 1965, most states wrote the palm sap into the same statute as the blackjack, and it disappeared from every legal counter. Number 19. Now here is where it gets strange. Also called a push dagger, this short blade sat between the second and third fingers, with the grip crossing the palm, so the whole fist drove the point, and a man never had to grip a handle at all. The blade ran 2 to 3 inches, the brass crossbar machined to fill the hand, the entire piece small enough to ride in a vest pocket beside a watch. Frontier cutlers sold them across the coalfields, and an 1897 Wheeling court record described one pulled in a camp dispute that left no doubt about its purpose. The steel sat cold against the palm, the brass worn gold bright from handling. A man carried a push knife when he expected to be grabbed before he was given room. The federal switchblade era swept these up too, and most states made the push dagger a felony to carry. The blade did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it worked too well. Number 18. Carried in a coat pocket for luck or nailed above a cabin door, the worn iron horseshoe was also a brutal weapon when slipped over 4 knuckles. A standard draft shoe weighed close to a pound, the curved iron fitting the hand like a crude knuckle guard, the calks at the heel adding bite to every blow. Every camp had a blacksmith, and a used shoe cost nothing, which is why a 1950 Mingo County constable noted they turned up in more fights than any store-bought weapon. The iron carried a cold mineral smell and rang faintly when it knocked against a buckle. A man who pocketed one on the way to a dance was not thinking about luck. No statute ever named the horseshoe, and the law never found a reason to take them. Number 17. This was not a pocket knife. The miner's carbide lamp wrench was a flat forged steel tool, 4 inches long, with a heavy squared head, designed to crack open a stuck lamp base and scrape spent carbide. Issued with every lamp and carried by every man underground, it fit the fist like a small flat hammer and struck with the full weight of forged steel behind a narrow edge. The supply house in Logan sold them for a few cents apiece, and they were as common in a miner's pocket as his tobacco. The steel held the sharp acetylene smell of the lamp long after the shift ended. A man who swung his lamp wrench was using the one weapon nobody could ever take off him. The law could not ban a lamp tool every working miner was required to carry. Number 16. a step beyond the weighted walking stick. The loaded cane was a hardwood shaft, bored and packed with lead at the head, purpose-built to look like an old man's support and strike like a club. The cane ran a full yard of seasoned hickory, a half-pound of lead poured into the crown. The balance set so the heavy end whipped forward with the speed of a swung axe handle. Mail order firms advertised them discreetly for around $3, and a retired Fayette County miner's estate sale in 1961 listed one plainly among his effects. The hickory had a smooth, oiled grain worn dark where the hand gripped. A man who leaned on a loaded cane was rarely as frail as he let the world believe. Most states folded the loaded cane into their concealed weapon laws, and the honest-looking walking stick became a felony overnight. Number 15. Truckers and miners alike carried short hardwood clubs called tipple knockers, made for knocking frozen coal loose from a stuck chute. The club ran 16 inches of seasoned oak or hickory, an inch and a half thick, weighted at the business end and worn smooth from gripping in cold weather, light enough to hang from a belt and heavy enough to break a wrist. Every tipple kept a rack of them, and they cost the operator nothing because the camp made its own. The wood gave a dry, solid knock against the steel chute, a sound every man on the section knew. A miner who walked home with his knocker still in hand was carrying a tool until the moment he wasn't. The knocker was never outlawed because no court could untangle the club from the job it was made for. Number 14. Brace yourself, because this one is controversial. The slungshot, sold openly in the Sears Roebuck catalog for 55 cents, was a lead ball wrapped in braided cord and swung from a short leather lanyard. The lead head weighed 6 ounces, the braided handle measured 8 inches, and the whole thing coiled flat into a pocket and deployed with a single flick of the wrist into a striking weight that moved faster than the eye could follow. Sailors brought the design inland, and a 1951 Beckley court record shows 3 confiscated from coal camp residents in 1 month. It made a faint metallic whisper when shaken, the cord worn soft from years in a pocket. A man who carried one wanted reach and surprise in something he could hide in his palm. The slungshot was among the first personal weapons specifically named and banned by state statute, outlawed across most of the country well before 1950. If this is making you think about what your own family left behind in a drawer somewhere, a quick like helps this channel reach more people. Completely up to you. Number 13. Heavier than the palm sap and shaped like a flattened beaver tail, the leather sap was the weapon of choice for mine guards and the men they guarded against alike. The body ran 9 inches, a broad, flexible leather paddle with a lead-weighted head sewn into the wide end and a spring shaft running the length of the grip, built to deliver a stunning flat blow across a surface rather than a point. Detective supply houses sold them for under $3, and a Baldwin Felts Guards 1921 expense ledger from the Logan camps lists 2 among his standard issue. The leather made a flat, dense slap against a pine table, nothing like a belt and nothing like a stick. A man who owned a real sap had usually been on one side of the law or the other. By the 1970s, the leather sap was banned in most states. Grandfathers who had carried them as mine guards quietly tucked them into dresser drawers. Number 12. A man could carry a length of rubber-coated cable anywhere in a mine, and nobody questioned it, because every section ran miles of it. A 2-foot piece of heavy mining cable, copper core sheathed in thick rubber, weighed close to 2 pounds and flexed like a whip, the dense core delivering a blow that bruised straight through to the bone without breaking skin. Scrap ends were everywhere underground, free for the taking, and a 1957 union grievance from a Raleigh County local mentions cable used to settle a dispute over a stolen lunch bucket. The rubber smelled faintly of coal dust and machine oil, the cut end frayed soft. A man who kept a length in his bucket was carrying nothing a foreman could ever write him up for. The law had no name for a piece of scrap cable, and so it took none. Number 11. The Barlow folding knife, introduced to American pockets generations before the coalfields opened, became the universal blade of every miner in the southern fields. The knife ran 3.5 inches closed, a single carbon steel clip blade riding in a bone or wood handle, with the distinctive long bolster, sharp enough to dress a rabbit and stout enough to be trusted with a man's life. The company store sold them for 35 cents, and a 1954 Tazewell store ledger shows them moving by the dozen every payday. The bone handle warmed in a pocket and wore amber smooth over the years, the blade snapping shut with a clean oiled click. A man who pulled his Barlow was usually cutting rope, not trouble, but the line between the two was thin in a camp. The Barlow itself was never banned, but blade-length laws slowly made its bigger brothers a crime to carry. Number 10. That tiny two-shot pistol, small enough to hide in a watch pocket, was the concealed insurance of the company paymaster and the gambler alike. The Derringer measured 4 inches overall, fired 2 large-caliber rounds from stacked barrels, and rode flat against the body where no casual glance would ever find it. A last resort, built for the distance across a card table. Frontier outfitters sold them throughout the coal towns, and a 1908 Welch newspaper reported one used to end a payday robbery before the thief cleared the door. The little gun sat cold and dense in the palm, the bluing worn silver at the muzzle. A man who carried a Derringer expected trouble he could not see coming. Concealed weapon laws came for the Derringer early, and what was once a gentleman's insurance became a felony in a closed fist. Number 9. A curved steel hook on a hardwood handle, designed for dragging timbers and moving loaded cars at the working face. The cant hook and its smaller cousin, the miner's hook, ran 2 feet of ash handle ending in a hardened steel point, light enough to swing one-handed and wickedly effective at catching and pulling, whether the load was a roof prop or a man. Every supply house in the coal fields stocked them, and the operator issued one to every timber crew at a cost of about $1 in 1950. The steel point caught the light dull and grey, the handle worn pale where the hands gripped. A man who walked out of the shaft, still holding his hook, was holding the most honest weapon on this list. No law ever touched the hook, because no court could separate it from the work. Number 8. This is the part nobody got right. The single-bit miner's axe, hung short for swinging in low coal, was the most underestimated weapon a camp family owned. The head weighed 2 pounds on a 20-inch hickory haft, ground sharp for splitting kindling and chopping props, balanced so close to the bit that a short, controlled swing carried devastating force in a confined space. Every cabin had one by the door, bought for under $2 at the company store, and a 1949 Boone County coroner's record names one in a dispute that needed no further explanation. The hickory smelled of split oak and wood smoke, the bit kept bright with a file. A family that kept an axe by the door was prepared for winter and for worse. No law ever came for the axe, because a man cannot heat his cabin with a banned tool. Number 7. A slungshot is a lead weight on a cord, but the chain whip was its heavier cousin, a length of tow chain wrapped at one end with leather for a grip. 2 feet of hardened steel links weighed 3 pounds and moved with a momentum nothing made of leather could match, the free end snapping through the air with enough force to shatter bone through a coat sleeve. Scrap chain hung in every mine and every barn, free and untraceable, and a 1956 Wyoming County Deputy's report describes one taken off a man outside a camp commissary. The chain rang a bright cold note when it uncoiled, the leather grip dark with sweat and oil. A man who wrapped a chain around his fist had decided the matter was already settled. The law had no statute for a length of chain, and so the chain whip survived every weapons ban on the books. Number 6. Also nothing more than a length of rubber hose at first glance. The loaded hose was a section of heavy garden or air hose packed with sand or lead shot and capped at both ends. It ran 18 inches, weighed close to 2 pounds when filled, and flexed just enough to wrap a blow around a raised arm, delivering a stunning impact that left almost no visible mark. Hardware stores sold the hose by the foot for pennies, and a 1953 Kanawha County assault case turned on a length of it that no one could prove was meant as a weapon. The rubber gave a dull, heavy thud and smelled faintly of the mine's compressed air lines. A man who filled a hose and capped it had built a weapon out of pure deniability. By the 1960s, courts learned to recognize the loaded hose for what it was, and possession became its own offense. Number 5. Not a weapon in the traditional sense. The heavy steel padlock was the universal security of every miner's tool chest and dinner bucket. A solid brass-bodied lock weighed half a pound, and tied into a bandana or the toe of a sock, it became a flail that swung with the speed of a sling and the impact of a hammer, the hardened shackle adding edges to every strike. The company store sold them for around 50 cents, and every man owned at least 2. The brass carried the sharp tang of oil and worn metal, the keyhole polished bright from daily use. A man who knotted a lock into a rag was reaching for the nearest heavy thing he was allowed to own. No law could ban a padlock, and so the oldest improvised weapon in the camps stayed perfectly legal forever. Number 4. Brass knuckles in their purest form. 4-finger holes cast into a single bar of solid brass with a palm support behind, the whole piece weighing 6 ounces and turning a closed fist into a block of metal that concentrated every pound of a man's weight into a single rigid surface. Mail-order houses sold them across the coalfields for $1, and a 1947 McDowell County evidence log records a pair taken from a miner after a payday brawl. The brass warmed to body heat and worn smooth across the striking bar, the inside of the holes polished bright from 100 clenched fists. A man who slipped on knuckles had stopped pretending the night might end peacefully. Brass knuckles were among the first weapons named and outlawed by state legislatures, a felony to carry concealed in most states before the coalfields ever closed. Number 3. The straight razor, sold in every company store next to the chewing tobacco, was the one weapon every coal miner carried in plain sight and called grooming. The blade ran 3 inches of folding carbon steel riding in a bone or celluloid handle, honed to split a hair, and snapping open with a flick of the thumb into a slashing edge that no fist or club could answer. Every man shaved with one, and the store in Gary stocked them for under $1, which meant a razor in a pocket raised not a single eyebrow. The steel opened with a cold whisper, the handle worn ivory smooth from 1,000 mornings. A man who reached for his razor in a fight was reaching for the most ordinary thing he owned. The razor did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it worked too well. Number 2. When a fight broke out in the bathhouse, every miner knew the cast iron skillet hanging in the camp kitchen became a weapon in the time it took to grab the handle. A number 8 skillet weighed 4 pounds, the flat iron face delivering a blow that ended an argument in a single swing, the long handle giving reach and leverage no fist could match. Every cabin had one, bought for under $1 at the store, and a 1951 Raleigh County docket records a domestic case that hinged entirely on one. The iron rang a deep, flat note when it struck and smelled of bacon grease and ash. A weapon that cooked a man's breakfast and defended his cabin was a weapon no law could ever come for. The skillet outlived every weapon statute ever written because no legislature dared outlaw supper. Number 1. Not the derringer, not the brass knuckles, the simple folding two-blade pocket knife with the worn bone handle, the one a miner pressed into his son's palm the day the boy first went underground. The knife ran 3 inches closed, 2 carbon steel blades riding in a handle gone amber with age, sharp enough for 1,000 small jobs and ready in an instant for one large one. The company stores sold them for 40 cents, and a 1955 estate inventory from a Logan County miner lists his by name, willed to a grandson. The bone handle held the warmth of a lifetime of pockets, the brass liners worn bright at the joint. A man who handed down his knife was handing down everything he knew about surviving the dark. Blade laws slowly turned the larger versions into crimes, but the pocket knife endured. The law never found a reason to take them. These were 25 ordinary objects a coal miner carried into the dark, every one of them a tool first and a weapon only when the night demanded it. Popular memory remembers the brass knuckles, the derringer, and the straight razor, because those made it into the films and the dime novels and the courtroom headlines. But the roll of pennies, the loaded hose, the tipple knocker, and the padlock in a sock vanished without a record because nobody thought to write down the things every man simply knew. Go check your grandfather's old tool chest. Open the bucket in the corner of the basement nobody has touched since the mine closed. You might find something on this list. The laws changed, the dark did not. Your great-grandfather knew exactly what he carried into that shaft and exactly why. Now you do too.